They tell you that on your wedding day, nothing else matters. The world is supposed to shrink down to the feel of your partner's hand in yours, the sound of their voice saying, I do, the hopeful, brilliant horizon of your future together. They don't tell you what to do when you wake up on that morning, and the future you've meticulously planned has been stolen from you, not by a stranger, but by your own flesh and blood. My wedding day began not with the soft melody of a love song, but with a scream that was trapped in my throat. The dress was gone. Not just any dress. It was my mother's. A vintage masterpiece of lace and silk from the 1970s, which I had spent the last 6 months, and a small fortune having lovingly restored by a specialist in New York. It was more than a dress. It was my history, my something borrowed, my connection to the mother I lost when I was just a teenager. It was the one piece of her that was supposed to walk me down the aisle, and it had vanished from its garment bag, which now hung, limp and empty, like a ghost in my hotel suite. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me first. I tore the room apart, my bridesmaids watching with wide, horrified eyes. I checked the closet a dozen times, under the bed, even in the bathroom, my mind refusing to accept the impossible reality. It had to be a prank, a terrible, cruel joke. My fiancé, Ethan, rushed in, his face a mask of concern, trying to calm me, but his words were just a distant buzzing. Then my maid of honor, my best friend Chloe, held up my phone. Her hand was trembling. Amy, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You have a text. My heart stopped. I knew, with a certainty that settled like a block of ice in my stomach, who it was from. It was from my sister, Charlotte. I took the phone, my fingers feeling numb. The message consisted of a single photo and a few devastating words. The photo was of Charlotte, preening in front of a full-length mirror, looking radiant, beautiful, and triumphant. She was wearing my mother's dress. It fit her perfectly, as if it had been made for her all along. And below the picture, the text, "It just looks better on me, don't you think? Decided to get married today instead. Don't worry, you're still invited to the party tonight. See you there, sis. XO." The casual cruelty of it, the breezy, dismissive tone, was more painful than a physical blow. She hadn't just stolen my dress, she had stolen my wedding day. She had taken my groom's name, Richard, and my venue, the opulent Grand Astoria ballroom that I had booked over a year in advance. She had hijacked my entire life, and she had done it with a smile and a kiss-off emoji. The room began to spin. The faces of my bridesmaids blurred into a watercolor of pity and shock. Ethan was on the phone, his voice a low, angry growl as he tried to get answers. But I couldn't hear him. All I could see was that photo. My sister, my golden, perfect older sister, who had always gotten everything she ever wanted, had decided she wanted my happiness too, and she had taken it as easily as she would borrow a sweater. And in that moment, something inside me, something that had been dormant for a lifetime of being the quiet, accommodating, good sister, finally snapped. The grief was still there, a howling, empty space where my joy was supposed to be. But beneath it, a new feeling began to rise. It was rage, cold and pure and clear as a diamond. She had invited me to her party. Fine, I would go to her party. But I would not be coming as a guest. I would be coming as a reckoning. And I would not be wearing white. I would be wearing her deepest, darkest secret. A secret I had discovered only 48 hours earlier. A secret I now realized was the key to this entire, monstrous betrayal. I would show up to her stolen wedding wearing her secret divorce papers. If you are just beginning this journey with me, please do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I need to know you're out there, listening. This isn't just a story about a stolen dress. It's a story about finding your voice in the silence. Let me know in the comments where in the world you're hearing this from. I have a feeling this story of sisterly betrayal is a universal language, and I want to know how far it can reach. To understand the sheer, calculated cruelty of what Charlotte did, you have to understand the landscape of our sisterhood. It wasn't a field of wildflowers where we ran hand in hand. It was a carefully cultivated garden where she was the prize-winning rose, and I was the sturdy, unremarkable trellis that existed solely to support her. From the moment I was born, Charlotte was the sun in our family's solar system. She was beautiful, charismatic, and effortlessly charming. She could flash a dazzling smile and convince our parents that the sky was green. I was the quiet one, the studious one, the one who followed the rules and cleaned up the messes Charlotte left in her glittering wake. If she broke a vase, I was the one who was told I should have been more careful where I left it. If she failed a test, I was the one who was enlisted to tutor her. My own studies pushed aside. Our parents weren't cruel. They were just enchanted. They saw her brilliance and my steadiness, and they assigned us our roles for life. She was destined for the spotlight. I was destined for the wings. This dynamic carried into our adulthood. Charlotte married David, a man 10 years her senior with a jawline as sharp as his investment portfolio. They lived in a sprawling mansion in the wealthiest part of town, drove matching luxury cars, and took extravagant vacations that they documented with nauseating perfection on social media. Her life was a curated masterpiece of success and happiness. I, on the other hand, had built my life quietly. I became a pediatric nurse, a job that suited my nature, calm, compassionate, and focused on helping others. I met Ethan, a kind, grounded high school history teacher, and our love story was a gentle, unfolding thing, not a dramatic firework display. It was real, and it was ours. When we got engaged, for the first time in my life, I felt like I had something that was truly mine, something that even Charlotte couldn't overshadow. And the centerpiece of that feeling was our mother's dress. After our mom passed, all her belongings were divided. Charlotte took the expensive jewelry, the designer handbags, the art. I asked for only one thing, the simple, elegant wedding dress she had worn when she married our father. It had been stored in a preservation box for 30 years, a time capsule of a love story I barely remembered but deeply revered. It was my one tangible link to her. The restoration was a labor of love. I found a woman named Elodie, a tiny, elderly artisan in New York who specialized in vintage textiles. For 6 months, I worked extra shifts at the hospital to pay for her meticulous work. We had weekly video calls where she would show me her progress, her gnarled fingers delicately repairing a tear in the lace, her voice a soft, French murmur as she explained the process of replacing the yellowed silk lining. The dress became my obsession, my secret project. When it was finally finished and arrived at my small apartment, I cried. It was perfect. It was more than a dress. It was my mother's spirit, lovingly brought back to life, ready to bless my own marriage. Of course, I showed it to Charlotte. I had to. She was my sister, my matron of honor. I remember the look on her face when I unzipped the garment bag. It wasn't the happy, tearful reaction I had hoped for. It was something else, something I couldn't quite read at the time. It was a flicker of intense, acquisitive desire, like a dragon spotting a new piece of gold for its hoard. "Oh, Amy," she had breathed, her fingers tracing the delicate lace. "It's divine. It's almost too beautiful for your little church wedding." The compliment was laced with a subtle poison, a suggestion that my wedding, my life, was somehow unworthy of such a magnificent object. Over the next few weeks, she began her campaign. It started with jokes. "Are you sure you don't want to just let me borrow it? My 10-year anniversary is coming up. A vow renewal would be perfect in this." When I laughed it off, she turned to emotional manipulation. "You know, Mom would have wanted me to have it," she'd say during our phone calls. "I was her firstborn. I look more like her. It would just mean more on me." Each comment was a small, calculated cut, designed to make me feel selfish and unworthy. The final attempt came 2 weeks before the wedding. She invited me to her mansion for lunch, a rare occurrence. We sat on her sprawling marble patio, overlooking a pool that shimmered like a sapphire. "Amy, darling," she said, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "I need to be honest with you. My life, it isn't as perfect as it looks. David and we're going through a rough patch. Seeing you so happy with this perfect wedding, this perfect dress, it's hard. Wearing that dress, just for a little while, it would feel like I was getting a piece of that happiness back. It would be like a fresh start for me. Please, Amy. You have Ethan. You have your whole life. Let me have this one thing." It was a masterful performance, a symphony of victimhood and flattery. And the old me, the me that had existed for 28 years, almost caved. The guilt was a physical weight on my chest. But Ethan's love had made me stronger. He had spent years building up the confidence that my family had spent years tearing down. "I'm sorry you're going through a tough time, Charlotte," I had said, my voice shaking but firm. "But this dress is not just a thing. It's Mom, and she is walking me down the aisle. I can't give it to you." The mask of vulnerability dropped from her face, replaced by a flash of cold, reptilian fury. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a wounded, tearful expression. But I had seen it. I had seen the real her. "Fine," she had sniffled, dabbing at her dry eyes. "If that's how you feel, I just thought you cared about my happiness." She didn't speak to me again until that text message on my wedding day. Now, sitting in the ruins of my bridal suite, I realized the whole story about her rough patch wasn't a lie to get the dress. The dress was just collateral damage. It was a prop in a much bigger, more desperate play. And I had stumbled upon the script. The discovery. The moment the entire axis of my world tilted on its side, happened 2 days before the wedding. It was a Thursday, a day that was supposed to be filled with final fittings and seating chart anxieties. I received a frantic call from my father. "Amy, honey, I need a huge favor. Your Aunt Carol is putting together a slideshow for the reception, and she's missing the main photo album from our 25th anniversary. I know Charlotte borrowed it for some event last year. Could you possibly swing by her place and pick it up? She's not answering her phone, and David is out of town." The request was laced with the casual assumption that I, Amelia, was the designated family errand runner, the one whose time was infinitely flexible. Normally, I would have sighed and agreed without a second thought, but this time, a strange prickle of unease went down my spine. Charlotte not answering her phone was unusual. She was surgically attached to the device. Still, it was for my wedding, so I agreed. When I arrived at their colossal, sterile mansion, the housekeeper, a kind woman named Sophia who always looked at me with a sort of weary pity, let me in. "Mrs. Thorne is not home, Miss Amelia," she said, wringing her hands. "She left in a great hurry this morning." I explained my mission, and Sophia gestured towards the library, a cavernous room with floor-to-ceiling mahogany shelves. "I believe she keeps the family albums in here," she said before disappearing to attend to some other task. The library was David's sanctuary, a place that smelled of old leather and money. It was meticulously organized, except for one corner of the massive oak desk. There, a stack of mail was piled haphazardly, as if someone had thrown it down in a rush. On top of the pile was a large, menacing-looking envelope from a law firm I didn't recognize, addressed to David. It was marked personal and confidential. I knew I shouldn't look. Every well-behaved, rule-following bone in my body screamed at me to turn away and find the photo album. But the unease I'd felt earlier had blossomed into full-blown suspicion. Charlotte's strange behavior, her desperate plea for the dress, her sudden unavailability, it all felt connected. Acting on an impulse I didn't recognize as my own, I picked up the envelope. The flap was unsealed, tucked in loosely. My heart hammered against my ribs. My hands were shaking. I told myself I was just going to peek, just to make sure everything was okay. I slid the thick sheaf of papers out. The document was headed in bold, stark letters. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." I sank into the plush leather chair behind the desk, the world tilting precariously. My eyes scanned the page, my brain struggling to process the cold, legalistic language. The petitioner was David Thorne. The respondent was Charlotte Thorne. This wasn't just a rough patch. This was the end. David was divorcing my sister. I read on, my horror mounting with every paragraph. The petition cited irretrievable breakdown of the marriage, and then it went into specifics. My breath caught in my throat. It detailed, with brutal clarity, Charlotte's reckless and irresponsible dissipation of marital assets. It listed astronomical credit card statements from designer boutiques, five-star resorts, and luxury spas, all on secret cards David had only just discovered. It mentioned personal loans taken out against their shared property without his knowledge. She had burned through a fortune, a staggering amount that made my nurse's salary look like pocket change. She was in a bottomless pit of debt. But that wasn't the worst of it. The petition went on to allege a pattern of deceit and adulterous behavior. It listed dates, times, and hotel names. It even named a specific person, a tennis pro, at their exclusive country club. It was a comprehensive, methodical demolition of the perfect life she had curated for the world. She wasn't the successful, happily married woman she pretended to be. She was a fraud, drowning in debt and deceit, and her husband had finally had enough. The documents were a secret declaration of war from David, and they had clearly been delivered that morning. That explained her frantic departure. She had seen them and fled. Suddenly, everything clicked into place with a sickening clarity. Her desperate, tearful plea for my mother's dress wasn't about sentimentality. Her talk of a fresh start wasn't about her marriage to David. She was being cast out of her gilded cage, and she was already lining up her next golden parachute. Richard, her new fiancé, the man she was marrying on my wedding day, was a tech billionaire, even wealthier than David. She hadn't stolen my wedding out of simple sisterly spite. It was a calculated, strategic, and utterly desperate business move. She needed to lock down a new source of funding before the news of her spectacular fall from grace became public. She needed a new husband before everyone knew she was a bankrupt, cheating, soon-to-be divorcee. My wedding, my dress, my venue, they weren't the prize. They were the tools for her financial survival. I wasn't just a sister she had wronged. I was collateral damage in her scorched earth campaign to save herself. I sat there, in the silent, opulent library, the divorce papers feeling like a toxic weight in my hands. The shock gave way to a wave of nausea. She had used her fake tears about her failing marriage to try and manipulate me, while the reality was so much worse than I could have imagined. And she had been prepared to walk down the aisle in our mother's dress, a sacred symbol of love and fidelity, to commit the most profound act of fraud. A cold fury began to seep into my veins, chilling the shock, hardening it into something solid and sharp. I thought about the photo album, the innocent reason I had come here. My eyes scanned the shelves, and then I saw it, on a lower shelf, tucked behind a set of encyclopedias, a sleek, black leather briefcase. It was out of place in the warm, wood-paneled room. It had Charlotte's initials, Connecticut, embossed in small silver letters. Driven by that same dark impulse, I lifted it onto the desk. It was unlocked. I opened it. Inside, nestled among Charlotte's own financial documents and a prenuptial agreement for her marriage to Richard, was the original, signed copy of the divorce petition. She hadn't just fled. She had taken the evidence with her. Without thinking, I slipped the thick document out of the briefcase and into my large purse. I replaced it with a stack of blank copy paper of the same thickness. Then I found the photo album, my hands moving with a strange, detached calm. I walked out of that house, my mind a maelstrom of horror and rage. I had come for a book of happy memories, and I was leaving with a testament to a life built on lies. I didn't know it then, but I was also leaving with the weapon that would bring it all crashing down. The 2 days between my discovery in the library and the morning of my stolen wedding were the strangest, most surreal of my life. I moved through the world in a state of hyper-clarity, a quiet, humming rage simmering just beneath my skin. The grief over the wedding was still there, a dull, constant ache in my chest, but it was now overshadowed by a purpose so sharp and clear it felt like a calling. I was no longer a victim of my sister's whims. I was the keeper of her truth, the secret narrator of her downfall. The divorce papers sat in the safe in my apartment, a coiled snake waiting to strike. Every time I thought of them, of the cold, hard facts they contained, the rage would surge, burning away any lingering sadness. Ethan was my rock. When I got home from Charlotte's and laid the papers out on our small kitchen table, he read them in stunned silence. He wasn't a man prone to anger, but as he read about the debt, the infidelity, and the sheer scale of the deception, a dark flush crept up his neck. "This is monstrous, Amy," he said, his voice low and tight. "This isn't just a rivalry. This is sociopathic." He was the one who helped me see past the emotional betrayal to the strategic reality. "She thinks you're weak," he said, taking my hands in his. "She thinks you'll do what you've always done. Cry, get over it, and eventually forgive her because that's your role. She is counting on your silence. The one thing she will never expect is for you to fight back." His words were a revelation. He was right. My entire life, my silence had been Charlotte's greatest weapon. My willingness to absorb the hurt, to smooth things over, to keep the family peace, had enabled her behavior for decades. She had stolen my wedding because she had absolutely no reason to believe there would be any real consequences. The text message she sent was not just cruel, it was confident. It was the act of someone who believed they were utterly untouchable. That night, the plan began to form in my mind. At first, it was a vague, vengeful fantasy. I imagined standing up at her reception and reading the divorce papers aloud. But that felt too messy, too hysterical. It would give her the satisfaction of painting me as the crazy, jealous sister. I needed something more elegant, more precise, more devastating. I needed a weapon that was as visually stunning as she was, something that would turn her greatest asset, her beautiful, perfect image against her. The idea came to me in the middle of the night. I woke up from a restless sleep with a single image burned into my brain. I was at her wedding, and I was wearing the words. Not just shouting them, but physically wearing them. It was a crazy, audacious idea, but the more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. It was theatrical. It was symbolic. It was a form of revenge that was so uniquely tailored to her vanity that it would be impossible for her to recover from. She had stolen the symbol of my love and purity, the dress. I would wear the symbols of her deceit and corruption. It was a perfect, terrible symmetry. The next morning, my first call was not to a lawyer, but to Elodie, the artisan in New York who had restored my mother's dress. I knew this was a long shot, but I was desperate. I explained the situation, my voice cracking with a mixture of grief and fury. I told her what my sister had done, and what I planned to do. I expected her to be shocked, maybe even to refuse, but there was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then she said, in her soft French accent, the little sister who was always in the shadow, "Yes? I have seen this before. A woman's wedding dress is her armor, her story. For your sister to do this, it is a sacrilege. What you are planning, it is not just revenge, ma chérie. It is justice. Tell me what you need." Elodie became my secret co-conspirator. I told her my vision. A dress, simple in its cut, but made of a fabric that was custom printed with the text from the divorce papers. We spent hours on a video call, me holding up the legal documents to my laptop camera, her squinting, taking notes. We selected the most damning phrases, the words that would cut the deepest. Irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. Dissipation of marital assets through reckless spending. A pattern of consistent and shameless adulterous behavior. We decided to arrange the words in a chaotic, overlapping pattern, like a graffiti of her sins, printed in a stark, charcoal gray against a pale, stone-colored silk. The effect would be subtle from a distance, looking like an abstract pattern, but up close, the words would be undeniable. Elodie understood instantly. It must be elegant, she insisted. The dress itself must be beautiful. The horror is in the words. It is the contrast that will make it so powerful. She promised she could do it. She had a connection at a specialty fabric printing house. She would work day and night. She would ship it overnight, guaranteed to arrive on the morning of the wedding. It would cost a fortune, more than the restoration itself, but I didn't care. I transferred the money from my savings account, the fund I had been building for a down payment on a house with Ethan. It felt like a worthy investment in my own liberation. While Elodie worked her magic, I had to play my part. I had to become the heartbroken victim Charlotte expected me to be. I didn't answer the dozens of calls from my parents, who had undoubtedly been fed a sanitized, self-serving version of the story by Charlotte. I let them think I was holed up, inconsolable. I texted Chloe and my other bridesmaids, telling them the wedding was off and that I needed some time alone. I didn't tell anyone about my plan, not even Ethan at first. This was my battle, and I needed to own it completely. The day before the wedding, the final piece of the puzzle fell into my lap. I received a registered letter. It was from David Thorne's lawyer. It was a formal notice, a courtesy copy of the divorce petition that had been officially filed with the court that morning. He had timed it perfectly. By filing it the day before her new wedding, he was ensuring that her marriage to Richard, if it happened, would be legally questionable at best. And it gave me the one thing I was missing. Irrefutable, public proof. The document I had was no longer a secret, private threat. It was now a public record. My revenge dress wouldn't just be airing dirty laundry, it would be displaying a legally filed factual document. Charlotte wouldn't be able to dismiss it as a lie or a misunderstanding. It was the truth, stamped and certified by the state of New York. I placed the official, court-stamped copy next to the one I had taken from her briefcase. My arsenal was complete. The only thing left to do was to get dressed for the party. The morning of what was supposed to have been my wedding, but was now Charlotte's coronation, dawned gray and overcast, the sky a perfect mirror of my mood. But beneath the surface of my rehearsed grief, a cold electric current of anticipation was humming. At precisely 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. It was a courier, holding a large, flat box with Elodie's New York atelier address on the label. My hands trembled as I signed for it. This was it. The weapon had arrived. I took the box into my bedroom and laid it on the bed, my heart thudding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. For a moment, I just stared at it. A plain cardboard box that held so much power, so much pain, and so much potential for a terrible, beautiful justice. Ethan came and stood in the doorway, his expression a mixture of concern and awe. I had finally told him the full, crazy details of the plan the night before. I had needed to say it out loud, to make it real. He had listened in silence, his eyes never leaving my face. He hadn't tried to talk me out of it. He hadn't called me crazy. When I was done, he had simply pulled me into his arms and said, "Okay, what do you need me to do?" His unwavering support was the foundation I was standing on. Now, he watched as I lifted the lid off the box. The dress was nestled in layers of soft, white tissue paper. As I lifted it out, the silk whispered as it unfolded. It was, as Elodie had promised, a work of art. The cut was deceptively simple, a sleeveless, high-necked sheath that fell to just below the knee. It was a silhouette of pure, understated elegance. The color was a pale, almost luminous gray, the color of a stormy sea. And then there were the words. Printed in a darker charcoal, they swirled across the fabric, overlapping and tumbling over each other in a chaotic yet artful cascade. From a distance, it looked like a modern, abstract print. You had to be close to read the story it told. Irretrievable breakdown, dissipation of marital assets, adulterous behavior, reckless spending. The language of the law, so cold and impersonal on paper, had been transformed into a textile of pure, concentrated shame. It was more powerful than I could have imagined. It was beautiful, and it was monstrous. "My God, Amy," Ethan breathed, stepping closer to examine the fabric. "It's a masterpiece." I held it up against myself, looking at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was someone I didn't recognize. The soft, gentle nurse was gone, replaced by a woman with a dangerous glint in her eye. This dress was armor. It was a declaration. I wasn't just going to a party. I was going to war. The rest of the day was spent in quiet preparation. The ceremony was scheduled for 6 p.m. at the Grand Astoria. I knew my parents would be there, flanking Charlotte, playing their roles as the proud, supportive family. They had left me a dozen voicemails, each one a masterclass in guilt and emotional blackmail. "Amelia, your sister is so distraught over this. She says you won't even speak to her. We are so disappointed in your behavior, Amelia. You are ruining what should be a happy day for our family. You need to be the bigger person. You need to come tonight and show your support." They had no idea. They had been so thoroughly blinded by Charlotte's lifelong performance that they couldn't see the truth, even when it was about to be worn as a dress. Their blindness no longer hurt me. It just fueled my resolve. I laid out my entire ensemble with the precision of a surgeon preparing her instruments. The dress? A pair of simple black stiletto heels, elegant and sharp, a sleek black clutch, and most importantly, a chic, full-length black cashmere coat. The coat was the key to the entire operation. It was my Trojan horse. I would arrive, looking somber and respectful, a grieving sister in mourning for her own lost wedding day. No one would suspect what lay beneath. Ethan and I planned our entrance with military precision. We would arrive fashionably late, just as the reception was getting into full swing after the ceremony. We needed maximum impact, which meant we needed the largest possible audience. We would enter, find our assigned table, and I would keep my coat on. I would endure the sympathetic looks, the whispered gossip, the triumphant, pitying smiles from Charlotte. I would absorb it all, letting her savor what she believed was her ultimate victory. The target moment for the reveal was the toasts. I knew, as if I had written the script myself, that my father would give a gushing, emotional speech about his beautiful, brilliant daughter, Charlotte. He would talk about her grace, her charm, her perfect life. And in that moment, as he held his perfect daughter up as a paragon of virtue, I would stand up, I would walk towards the stage, and I would take off my coat. As the clock ticked closer to 6 p.m., a strange calm settled over me. The rage was still there, a pilot light burning steadily inside me, but it was now overlaid with an icy sense of control. I showered and did my makeup, my hands steady. I put on the dress. The silk felt cool against my skin, the weight of the words a strange comfort. This was not an act of impulsive anger. It was a carefully considered, deliberately executed act of justice. Charlotte had written her own story, full of lies and illusions. Tonight, I was going to edit it with the truth. Ethan came and stood behind me as I looked in the mirror one last time. He didn't say anything, just put his hands on my shoulders, his reflection steady and strong next to mine. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. I met his eyes in the mirror. The woman looking back was ready. She had been preparing for this her entire life. "Let's go to the party," I said. The drive to the Grand Astoria was silent. The city lights blurred past the windows, a smear of festive color that felt alien and distant. My inner world was a quiet, focused space, all my energy coiled and waiting. Ethan drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my knee, a small, grounding point of contact in the swirling vortex of my emotions. He didn't need to speak. His presence was enough. He was my partner in this, my silent accomplice, and his belief in me was the final piece of my armor. As we pulled up to the hotel's grand entrance, my heart gave a painful lurch. This was it. This was where I was supposed to have arrived hours earlier in a vintage limousine, filled with butterflies and joy. Instead, I was arriving in a sensible sedan, filled with cold, hard purpose. Valets in crisp uniforms rushed forward, but we waved them off, opting for the self-park garage. We needed a moment to ourselves, a final breath before stepping into the lion's den. In the quiet concrete stillness of the parking garage, I looked at Ethan. "No matter what happens in there," I said, my voice low and earnest, "I love you. This whole insane, terrible thing, it's only made me more sure of that." He leaned over and kissed me, a soft, lingering kiss that was full of promises for a future that would be ours, on our own terms. "I love you too, Amy," he said. "Now go raise hell." I put on the black cashmere coat, buttoning it all the way to my neck. It completely concealed the dress, transforming my appearance from a walking scandal to a woman in somber, elegant attire. We took the elevator up to the ballroom level. As the doors slid open, the sound of the party washed over us, a wave of music, laughter, and the clinking of hundreds of glasses. The reception was in full swing. We walked to the check-in table, and I gave my name. The young woman at the desk looked up, her eyes widening slightly in recognition. A flicker of pity crossed her face. "Oh, Miss Amelia," she stammered. "We have you at table 19. She couldn't meet my eyes." The entire staff had undoubtedly been gossiping about the dramatic, last-minute change of brides. I was the tragic figure in their evening's entertainment. We walked into the ballroom, and it was like stepping into another world, a world Charlotte had stolen and made her own. The room was breathtaking. Thousands of white roses and peonies cascaded from enormous crystal vases. A string orchestra played in the corner. A 5-tiered wedding cake, an exact replica of the one I had designed, stood like a monument to her theft. And everywhere, there were people, hundreds of them. The city's elite, all dressed in their finest, all blissfully unaware of the truth simmering beneath the glittering surface. Our table was, as I had hoped, near the back. It gave us a clear view of the head table on its raised dais. And there she was. Charlotte sat in the center, a radiant queen on her throne, and she was wearing my mother's dress. Seeing it on her in person was a physical blow. It was as beautiful as I had remembered, the vintage lace glowing under the soft lights. On her, it looked wrong. It was like seeing a masterpiece of art hung in a cheap, gaudy frame. She wore it like a costume, a trophy she had won. Richard, her new husband, a handsome, silver-haired man who looked more like her father than her partner, sat beside her, beaming with a kind of dazed, proprietary pride. My parents were at the same table, their faces glowing with a happiness that felt like a personal betrayal. They were so proud of their brilliant daughter, so completely invested in her success, that they had willingly participated in the erasure of mine. As we sat down, a few people at our table offered awkward, sympathetic smiles. No one knew what to say. I was the ghost at the feast, the living embodiment of a scandal they were all trying politely to ignore. I played my part. I nodded. I murmured hellos. I kept my coat on. I could feel Charlotte's eyes on me from across the room. I didn't look up, but I could feel the heat of her triumphant gaze. She was watching me, savoring this. She wanted to see me suffer. She wanted to see me broken. I gave her nothing. I focused on the plate in front of me, a piece of salmon I had no intention of eating. For the next hour, I endured. I listened to the mindless chatter around me. I watched my father work the room, accepting congratulations, his chest puffed out with pride. I watched my mother dab at her eyes with a lace handkerchief as she gazed adoringly at her firstborn. Every moment was a fresh twist of the knife, but with each twist, my resolve hardened. They were celebrating a lie, a beautiful, glittering, expensive lie. And I was the keeper of the truth. Finally, the moment came. The band leader tapped his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. It is now time for our toasts, beginning with the father of the bride, Mr. Alan Miller." A hush fell over the room. My father, his face flushed with champagne and pride, walked to the microphone in the center of the dance floor. He beamed at Charlotte. "My daughter," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "My beautiful, brilliant Charlotte, from the moment you were born, you have been a light in our lives. You have always known what you wanted, and you have never been afraid to go after it. Your strength, your grace, your incredible spirit, they are an inspiration to us all." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Strength? Grace? He was describing a fantasy, a character she had been playing her entire life. He continued, gushing about her perfect marriage to Richard, about the bright future they had ahead of them. "To see you here tonight, so happy, so in love, wearing your grandmother's," he corrected himself, "your mother's dress. It fills an old man's heart with more joy than I can say. You have found your perfect match, your true happiness, and you deserve every bit of it." He raised his glass. "To Charlotte and Richard!" The room erupted in applause and cries of, "To Charlotte and Richard!" As people began to drink, I pushed back my chair and stood up. The movement was quiet, but in the crowded room, it was enough to draw a few eyes. Ethan put a steadying hand on my arm. I gave him a small, determined nod. This was it. I began to walk, my steps slow and deliberate, not towards the microphone, but towards the small, empty space at the edge of the dance floor, directly in my father's line of sight as he returned to his table. He saw me, and a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He thought I was going to make a scene, to make a tearful, embarrassing speech. Charlotte saw me too, and she smirked, whispering something to Richard, who chuckled. They thought I was a joke. They thought I was pathetic. They had no idea what was coming. I stopped in the center of their attention. I met my sister's triumphant, mocking gaze, and with a slow, deliberate movement, I reached for the top button of my coat. The air in the ballroom was thick with self-congratulation and the sweet scent of roses. The applause for my father's toast was just beginning to die down as I reached the edge of the dance floor. A small pocket of silence formed around me as the guests at the nearest tables noticed my solitary, silent figure. My father, halfway back to the head table, stopped and frowned at me, an expression of clear paternal warning on his face. "Don't you dare ruin this, Amelia!" My mother shot me a look that was a cocktail of embarrassment and pleading, but my eyes were locked on Charlotte. Her smirk was still in place, a glittering, cruel curve of her lips. She was enjoying this final, public confirmation of her victory and my defeat. She leaned back in her chair, a queen surveying her court, waiting for the jester to perform her pathetic little act of sorrow. I didn't say a word. The power was not in speaking. It was in showing. My hands went to the top button of my black cashmere coat. The button was cool and smooth against my trembling fingers. I took a deep breath, held it, and then, with a slow, almost theatrical deliberation, I undid it. Then the next one, and the next. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me now, a palpable weight of curiosity and confusion. The music had softened to a barely audible murmur. The chatter had ceased. The only sound was the frantic thumping of my own heart. With the last button undone, I let the coat slide from my shoulders. It pooled at my feet on the polished marble floor, a circle of black in a sea of white and gold, and I stood there, revealed. At first, there was just confusion. From across the room, my dress would have looked like a chic, modern art piece, a swirl of gray patterns on elegant silk. But I had positioned myself close to the head table, close enough for them to read. I watched my father's face as his eyes adjusted. I saw the moment his brain processed the shapes, not as a pattern, but as letters. I saw the blood drain from his face, his champagne flute slipping from his fingers to shatter on the floor. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth, her eyes wide with a horror that was, for the first time, not directed at me. But my triumph, my focus, was Charlotte. I watched her. Her smug smile faltered, then dissolved completely. Her brow furrowed in confusion, and she leaned forward slightly, squinting. I took a single, deliberate step closer, and then another. I saw the exact moment she was able to read the first clear phrase emblazoned across my chest. Irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. Her face, which had been a mask of radiant joy, simply collapsed. It was like watching a beautiful ice sculpture instantly melt into a puddle of shock and disbelief. Her eyes, wide and terrified, darted across the fabric of my dress, reading the litany of her own secret sins. Dissipation of marital assets, reckless spending, adulterous behavior. A sound escaped her lips, a small, strangled gasp. She looked from the dress to my face, her eyes begging, pleading for this not to be real. But I gave her nothing. My expression was a calm, blank canvas, reflecting back the full force of her own horror. Richard, her new billionaire husband, had noticed her reaction. He leaned over, a confused and concerned look on his face. "Charlotte, darling, what is it?" he murmured. Then his eyes followed her gaze to my dress. He was closer. He could read the words easily. His affable, slightly tipsy expression vanished, replaced by a cold, hard fury. He looked at Charlotte, then back at my dress, then back at her, the pieces of a terrible puzzle clicking into place in his mind. The guests at the head table had all seen it now. The whispers started, a low, sibilant hiss that began to spread through the room like a gas leak. "What does it say? Is that writing on her dress?" People began to stand up, craning their necks. Someone at a nearby table pulled out their phone and zoomed in with the camera. I heard a woman gasp, "Oh my God, it's a legal document." The truth was spreading, a virus of scandal moving from table to table. Charlotte scrambled to her feet, knocking over her chair with a clatter. "How could you?" she shrieked, her voice a raw, ugly sound that was utterly alien in the elegant ballroom. "How could you do this to me?" The mask was gone. The radiant bride was replaced by a cornered, frantic animal. My father was now at her side, his face a mottled purple. "Amelia, what is the meaning of this? Cover yourself up this instant!" he boomed, his voice shaking with rage. But his authority, which had governed my entire life, was gone. It had no power over me anymore. I didn't respond to either of them. I simply reached into my small black clutch and pulled out a stack of neatly folded papers. It was the officially court-stamped copy of the divorce petition. I held it up. "This?" I said, my voice clear and steady, easily carrying through the stunned silence. "This is just the summary. I have the full version right here. Would anyone like to read it? It's a public record now, after all." I looked directly at Richard, whose face had become a thunderous mask of betrayal. I saw in his eyes that he understood everything. He wasn't just a groom. He was Charlotte's mark, her escape plan, and he had just been publicly humiliated at his own wedding. Charlotte let out a sob, a sound of pure, unadulterated despair. She turned and fled, tripping over the train of my mother's dress, a dress that now looked like a cruel joke. She ran from the ballroom, her sobs echoing behind her. My father, after a moment of stunned paralysis, ran after her. My mother sat at the table, frozen, her face a crumpled mask of agony, as the perfect world she had so carefully curated and protected for her favorite daughter detonated before her very eyes. Richard stood there for a long moment, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. He looked at me, not with anger, but with a strange, cold look of something that might have been gratitude. Then he turned, walked to the microphone my father had just abandoned, and tapped it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl that commanded immediate silence. "It appears this marriage is based on certain misrepresentations." He let the words hang in the air. The wedding is off. The bar is open. Please, enjoy the evening on me. I believe I have some legal matters to attend to." He dropped the microphone onto the floor with a loud thud, turned, and strode out of the ballroom without a single look back. The party was over. The fairy tale had ended. And I was the one who had burned the book. The moment Richard dropped the microphone, it was as if a spell had been broken. The stunned, tomb-like silence of the ballroom shattered into 1,000 pieces. A roar of conversation erupted, a chaotic symphony of gasps, shocked whispers, and frantic speculation. Every single person in that room was now on their feet, their faces turned towards the empty head table, then towards me. I was the epicenter of the earthquake that had just leveled the carefully constructed world of Charlotte Thorne. The media guests, who had been there to capture society fluff, had just been handed the scandal of the decade. Their cameras, which had been dormant, were now up and flashing, a relentless barrage of light trying to capture my face, my dress, the wreckage. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, the black cashmere coat, a discarded skin at my feet. I let them look. I wanted them to see. This wasn't just about Charlotte anymore. This was about me, Amelia, the quiet, invisible sister, finally taking up space, finally being seen. I met the flashing lights with a calm I didn't know I possessed. Ethan was by my side in an instant, his hand finding the small of my back, a solid, reassuring pressure. He wasn't trying to shield me or hide me. He was standing with me, a silent declaration of partnership. The groom was gone. The bride had fled. The parents of the bride were in pursuit. The head table was a scene of utter disarray, an overturned chair, a shattered champagne flute, a testament to a celebration that had died a violent, public death. The guests were in a frenzy. I saw people huddled in small groups, their phones out, undoubtedly texting and tweeting the news. I had not only ruined a wedding, I had launched a citywide gossip supernova. A few brave, or perhaps just nosy, guests began to approach me. An older woman in a cascade of diamonds, whose face I vaguely recognized from society pages, came closer, her eyes wide with a kind of horrified glee. "My dear," she said, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Is it true? Is that her divorce petition?" I simply looked at her, then down at my dress. The words were their own answer. I didn't need to say a thing. The dress spoke for me. It told the whole, ugly truth more eloquently than I ever could. The hotel's security began to move in, their faces grim, trying to create some semblance of order in the chaos. A man in a sharp suit, clearly the hotel manager, approached us, his expression frantic. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," he said, his voice strained. "Of course," I said calmly. My work here was done. I had planted the bomb, watched it detonate, and surveyed the wreckage. There was nothing left to do. Ethan bent down and picked up my coat. He didn't try to make me put it on. He simply draped it over his arm. There was no more need for hiding. As we walked towards the exit, the crowd parted for us like the Red Sea. The whispers followed us, a wave of sound. "That's her sister. Can you believe the nerve?" Said he was cheating on her. The narrative was already taking shape, the story being written in real time by the astonished witnesses. I held my head high. Let them talk. They were finally talking about the truth. Just as we reached the grand doors of the ballroom, I saw my mother. She was standing there, looking lost and frail, her face streaked with tears. She had obviously given up on chasing after Charlotte and had come back, perhaps looking for an explanation, perhaps for a fight. She blocked my path, her eyes blazing with a pain so deep it was almost terrifying. "How could you, Amelia?" she whispered, her voice raw with grief and disbelief. "She is your sister, your family. You have destroyed her. You have destroyed everything." For a moment, the old guilt, the old programming tried to surface. A lifetime of being told to be the bigger person, to keep the peace, to protect Charlotte's fragile ego, fought against my newfound strength. But then I looked into her eyes, and I saw not just a grieving mother, but an enabler, a co-architect of the very system that had allowed Charlotte to become the monster she was. "No, Mum," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. "I didn't destroy her. She destroyed herself with her own lies. And you all helped her. You held the match while she set my life on fire. All I did was turn on the lights so everyone could see the smoke." My mother flinched as if I had slapped her. She had no response. The truth, so long ignored in our family, was in language she no longer knew how to speak. I walked around her, leaving her standing there in the doorway of the ruined party, a relic of a family dynamic I had just officially dismantled. We walked out of the hotel and into the cool, clean night air. It felt like I could breathe again, truly breathe, for the first time in my life. The weight of being Charlotte's sister, a weight I had carried since birth, had been lifted. As we waited for our car, my phone began to buzz incessantly. Texts and missed calls from relatives, from old family friends, from people I hadn't heard from in years. The news was already out. I silenced it and put it in my purse. I didn't want to hear their opinions, their judgments, their shock. I didn't need their validation or their condemnation. When we got back to my quiet apartment, it felt like a sanctuary. I took off the dress, the armor, and hung it carefully in my closet. It was a piece of history now, my personal declaration of independence. Ethan poured us 2 glasses of wine, and we sat on my small sofa in a comfortable, exhausted silence. The adrenaline was finally beginning to fade, leaving a strange, hollowed-out calm in its wake. I had done something terrible, something unforgivable in the unspoken code of family loyalty. I had exposed a secret, ruined a life, and shattered my family. But as I sat there, sipping my wine, curled up next to the man I loved, I didn't feel a shred of regret. I felt free. The future was a blank page, and for the first time, I was the one holding the pen. The wedding I had lost felt like a small price to pay for the self I had just reclaimed. The days following the gala were a surreal blur of fallout and freedom. The story exploded across social media and the city's gossip columns, complete with blurry phone pictures of me in the now infamous divorce dress. I became a temporary, anonymous legend, the scorned sister who had enacted the most public and creative revenge imaginable. I ignored the noise, unplugging from social media and letting all calls from unknown numbers go to voicemail. My quiet apartment became my fortress against the storm I had unleashed. The reaction from my family was exactly what I had expected. My parents left a series of escalating voicemails, moving from tearful pleading to furious condemnation. They called me cruel, vindictive, and heartless. They accused me of being jealous of Charlotte's happiness, a line so tragically ironic it would have been funny if it weren't so sad. In their final message, my father informed me that I had made my choice and was no longer welcome in their home until I issued a formal, public apology to my sister. I deleted the message without a second thought. The price of their love had always been my silence and submission, and I was no longer willing to pay it. As for Charlotte, she simply vanished. After fleeing the reception, she went completely underground. Her social media accounts were deactivated. Her phone was disconnected. I heard through the grapevine of family gossip that Richard had, true to his word, immediately initiated annulment proceedings, citing fraud. His lawyers were notoriously ruthless, and they, along with David's lawyers, were systematically dismantling every aspect of her fraudulent life. She was facing a mountain of legal battles and a crater of debt, all on her own. The golden child, who had never had to face a single consequence in her life, was now facing them all at once. I felt a strange, detached pity for her, the way you might feel for a beautiful, venomous snake that has finally eaten its own tail. But I felt no guilt. She had built her own prison, and I had simply opened the doors for everyone to see inside. The true turning point for me came about a week later. Ethan and I were sitting on the floor of my living room, eating pizza out of a box and planning our own wedding. We had decided to elope. No big venue, No five-tiered cake. No guest list full of people who didn't really know us. Just us, a justice of the peace, and the wild, beautiful coastline of Oregon. It was going to be simple, honest, and completely ours. As we were debating the merits of a seaside cliff versus a quiet redwood grove, there was a knock on my door. It was my mother. She stood there alone, looking older and more fragile than I had ever seen her. Her face was pale, and the confident, matriarchal air she usually wore was gone, replaced by a look of profound, weary sadness. "Can I come in, Amelia?" she asked, her voice quiet. I hesitated, then stepped aside. We sat in my living room, the silence thick with unspoken words. "I saw her," my mother finally said, her eyes fixed on her hands, which were twisted in her lap. "I saw Charlotte. She's staying with an old college friend. She's a wreck. She's lost everything." I waited, saying nothing. "She told me everything," my mother continued, her voice trembling. "About the debt, about David, about all of it. She lied to us, Amelia, for years. She built a life out of lies, and we believed every single one." She finally looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "I am so sorry," she whispered, the words sounding foreign and difficult on her tongue. "We were so dazzled by her, we couldn't see you. We didn't protect you. I am so sorry." It was the apology I had been waiting my entire life to hear. It wasn't an excuse, it wasn't a justification, it was a simple, heartbreaking admission of her own blindness. And in that moment, the last vestiges of my anger melted away, replaced by a deep, aching sadness for all the years we had lost, for the family we could have been. I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't, but I did reach out and take her hand. "I know, Mom," I said softly. It was a beginning, a small, fragile foundation on which we might, one day, be able to build something new. 2 weeks later, Ethan and I drove to the Oregon coast. We stood on a wind-swept cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, the sky a vast, endless blue. Our only witnesses were two of our closest friends, Chloe and her husband. I didn't wear a traditional wedding dress. I wore a simple, cream-colored sundress that I had bought for $30 at a local shop. It was perfect. As I said my vows to Ethan, with the sound of the crashing waves below and the salty wind in my hair, I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost overwhelming. This was real. This was a marriage built not on illusion or desperation, but on a foundation of love, respect, and unwavering partnership. I never saw Charlotte again. I heard, years later, that she had moved to a small town in the Midwest, was working a quiet office job, and had remarried, this time to a man of modest means. I hope she found some semblance of peace. I hope she learned that a life built on your own truths, however humble, is infinitely more valuable than a palace built on lies. As for me, I have my truth. I have a husband who is my true partner. I have a tentative, healing relationship with my parents. And I have a beautiful, elegant, and monstrous dress hanging in the back of my closet. A reminder that sometimes you have to wear your truth, no matter how ugly it is, in order to finally be free.